Hello, this is going to be a tutorial on how to do skeletal model replacements or skeletal mesh replacements, custom character model replacements for rooftops and alleys. It's an Unreal Engine 5 game. Um, as you can probably tell by the intro, this is going to be pretty unscripted for the most part. I'm just kind of doing this mostly in real time. I might cut up the video. I don't know. It just depends on how long this really goes because I don't really even know myself. But I feel like it's important that I do it this way just to show from start to finish what to do. Um, I'm not going to be covering like a lot of different Blender basics, but I will be covering all the stuff that I feel like is important to mention, just to try to make the process as easy as I can. So, with that being said, let's start with what you're going to need. So, we're going to need Unreal Engine 5 version 5.2.1. You can get that by downloading the Epic Games Launcher. You download that, install that, and when you do that, you're going to have this little window pop up. You'll go to Unreal Engine here, and then Library or somewhere around here. You'll download Unreal Engine version 5.2.1. You can also you'll like click the little plus maybe or something along those lines. You'll find the right version. This is pretty self-explanatory. I already have it, so I'm not going to do it, but that's essentially how you would do it. Next, you're going to need FModel. You just go to, I'll have links in the description for all these things, by the way, but you're going to need FModel. You're going to get basically just an exe. Let me actually go to my folder here that I have set up. I'll explain all this later. But all you're really going to get is like an exe file. I'll go more into this later, but for now, that's really just expect to only have an exe. There's no like proper install like a lot of other programs on Windows. You're also going to need a mappings file. This is for FModel. This is just so that we can actually open up the game's files and export the models and animations out that we need. So you're going to need this. Again, links in the description. I'm going to be using Blender 4. I'm going to be using Blender 4.1.1. You can use really any version of Blender that you want to, but there is a plugin that you're going to need, which is this one right here, the IOScene PSK PSA plugin. There's different versions depending on the version of Blender that you're using. Since I'm in Blender 4.1.1, I'm going to be using the latest version. So if I just click here, it'll take me here, and then you just download this zip file right here. And I'll show you how to install that later on when we get to the Blender section. Now, depending on where you get your model, you may want to have something to edit the textures with. That's better than Paint or whatever. So I'm going to show a couple options, or three, that I would recommend using. I don't personally use any of these. I use Photoshop, but Photoshop isn't free. So I'm just going to show you a couple free options, and I'm not going to be covering, or I don't expect to have to edit textures for this, but in case I do, the stuff that you see me do in Photoshop, you can most likely all do the same sorts of things in these other programs. So just bear that in mind. First one's GIMP. Uh, I don't personally like it that much, but you can experiment, try it for yourself. This is designed for photo editing and texture editing and stuff like that, sort of. So it might work better for you if you like the more weird UI. Just look up some videos on it. Krita is another good example of one I think might work decently well. The thing about this one though is that it's more built for like art and painting and drawing more than it is for photo editing, but it still has ways to edit photos, so I think it would probably be good enough to use. And then the next one is Photopia, which this is entirely online based, as you can tell by some of the ads and stuff here. But if I were to open up like a file from my computer in here, it essentially works almost exactly like Photoshop. So if you've used Photoshop, you don't have it yourself, this is the next best thing if you want something free, and you don't have to install anything. That being said, obviously, you're going to have an internet connection for this. So, Anyway, those should be all the things you need. So before I jump any further, let's actually talk about how I keep stuff organized a little bit, because in my attempts to help people out in the Discord server, shout out to the Discord server for this game, I've seen people try to mod for it, and they'll have their files like all over the place, and it just gets a mess. It gets to be a mess because they're working with a bunch of different files from different locations, and they're going between different programs. Um, if you have a way to organize stuff that works for you, great. But here's how I like to do it. So I like to keep in one of my hard drives just a folder that's just labeled the game modding, right? And then I have a folder specifically for FModel. I put underscores here so that they show up at like the top of the list. I just think it's easier for me to spot things that way. I have a folder for when I pack finished projects. I have a folder for my working projects. And then I also have this folder when I was like moving stuff between the pack folders of the game and here, which by the way, I will go into where to put files and all that stuff later on. And then I have some other miscellaneous stuff in here. I have my UE5 projects that I make for the game actually in this directory. And then I have shortcuts to the folders that I need to go to for the game. So I have two shortcuts. One just goes to the base game install like this, and another one goes to the Paks folder, which looks like this. Um, so if you want to get to the Paks folder, here's what I'd recommend you do. So first of all, I'd recommend you do something similar, like organize your stuff, because it's going to save you a lot of headache in the long run. But if you want to find where these files or this folder is at on your computer, because the Paks folder is going to be in a different location for you than it probably is for me. To find that, you can go to Steam, go to the game, right click on it, go to Manage, Browse Local Files, and it will take you right to where your game install is. To look for the Paks folder, you open up this folder, Rooftops and Alleys, Content, Paks, and here it is. If you want to make a shortcut, usually what I do is right click. I'm on Windows 10. Right click, create a shortcut. This will get sent to just in here, and then you can just drag this over into the folder, and you have a shortcut that you can use, right? So I can just, say I wanted to keep it on my desktop or something like that. I could just double click on it, and it takes me right where I want to go, which is helpful because you will be going to these folders a lot if you're trying to troubleshoot stuff. So, okay, now that we've covered all that, let's talk about how to actually get the files out that we need from the game. So we're going to open up FModel, double click on it here. And for me, it's going to already have the game install here, but like let's say for instance it didn't. What you're probably going to see is something like this. You're probably going to see a game like detected game, all this sort of stuff, or I might say undetected. What you need to change here in the instruction for the directory selector is change the version type to game UE5 underscore 2, and then you can specify the directory of where your game is supposed to be located. So, for example, like if I go to, like, I can say, like, you can add an undetected game, by the way, too. So if I do something like this, like, you can say name, you can say rooftops and alleys, and then you can go to the directory, which in my case, if I go here and then I just go to the directory because I had the shortcut made, select folder, hit OK, and it should load it for you. Basically, just have the main directory. If you go to the main directory from Steam and you add it in there, it should pull these files up like this. Now, the problem is that you're not going to be able to export anything because you need a mappings file in order for the game to basically parse through. I'm not going to get too far into the weeds on it. You just need a certain file to get this all to work. So what you're going to do is in FModel, you're going to go to your settings. You're going to go to, I think I'm actually in the right spot. Yeah, in general in here. And you're going to see local mapping file, and it's going to be disabled by default. You want to enable that, and then in the mapping file path, specify where it is. So for me, I put my mappings file inside of the FModel folder like this. That mappings file I told you guys to download. You'll put that in here, open it, and then you're going to have to restart FModel for the changes to take effect. But once you do that, you should be able to just, open these files, export what you want. Shouldn't be any issues. Okay, once you get to this point, we're going to export out some models and some animations. We're going to do the animations specifically so that we can test some stuff later on. So just to clarify on that. So we'll go to content, character, 2024 character. And again, I should also clarify something here too. Um, where this stuff is located is subject to change. This game is still in active development. So this guide might get outdated in 3 or 4 months. I don't really know. Um, but hopefully, if anything, if stuff changes, like the location of stuff, hopefully what I show in Blender will help with anyone that's looking at this guide later on and stuff tends to be in different spots or something. You'll at least understand the process. So if stuff is in different places or it's organized a different way or structured a different way, that'll help you with at least troubleshooting that sort of stuff on your own. Anyway, so we have the 2024 character, body parts, all this stuff in here. What I would say to do, the easiest thing to do, is just to export all this. So we'll just right click here and save folder packages models PSK. Just click there. And it's just going to go through and it's going to save all these model files from within all these folders here. We don't necessarily need all these things, but it's just easier to do this than finding a particular one and pulling from there, in my opinion. And then what we're going to do is we're going to grab the animations, which is in main folder, content, animations. I'm just going to click at the top of the list, right click, save folders, packages, animations.psa. And this will take a little bit less time because animation files aren't really like super large usually. So we'll let this run through. And this is going to pull all of the animations that are involved with like the character doing tricks and flips and running and all that sort of stuff. So that's pretty much it. That's all we needed. So, well, we might come back to this to discuss where like materials and how things should be set up if we need to. If we need to troubleshoot stuff, I would still recommend to keep FModel to troubleshoot things. But for exporting stuff, we should have everything exported. So where it got exported to is going to be in this folder, this output folder. You're going to go to exports, and it should be under a folder labeled game. And then you're going to have, the character, 2024 character, body parts, all the model parts will be in here. And then your animation stuff will all be in here. Okay, so we've gotten this far. Let's move on to Blender. And then it's going to be a little daunting. Maybe before watching this guide, it would also be helpful if you were to say watch a guide on using Blender, like the basics of Blender. That might help, like the donut tutorial. But hopefully what I'll show or what I'll have some hotkeys that I mentioned that I think might help people transitioning over, say, from uh, using from like games or Unreal Engine or other like game engines to Blender. Um, I'll mention like a couple different things. We'll just get into it. Let me actually double check something here. I did write down some notes in case I'm like missing something, but I don't think I am. Yeah, okay. So let's move on from here to Blender. Okay, so we have Blender booted up here. Um, the intro screen might look a little bit different for you than it will for me. Um, but just pick whatever settings you think might work well. I would stick with the Blender hotkeys, the default ones if you've never used Blender before. But if you're coming over from, say, Maya or 3ds Max, or maybe you're used to doing things in Unreal Engine 5 and you're used to the way you navigate around or the hotkeys there, there is also the industry standard hotkeys that you can use by default for Blender. There's a different key map for it you can actually find in the preferences here. I use the industry compatible or industry standard kind of key map system because I come from Maya originally, and that's helped me a lot with transitioning to Blender, but I have made my own key maps over time. Just kind of use whichever one you think feels natural. Or, again, you can follow a tutorial guide on Blender and it will show you different things. However, you'll probably see me fly through a lot of different shortcuts and hotkeys. I'll try to keep things slow, but just understand that since I'm using the industry standard hotkeys or the industry compatible hotkeys, some of the shortcuts I use might be different than what you would see in other tutorials. But there is one hotkey that I will mention that I think is really helpful, at least for navigating the window and moving it around, and that's the walk navigation hotkey, where I can use a button to fly around in WASD like this, and I can use my mouse wheel to speed up and slow down, and it makes things a bit easier because I come from other programs where you could toggle like a fly camera. So to do that, what you can do is go to View, go to View, Navigation, Walk Navigation. And if you want to set a keybind for this, or a hotkey for this, you can right click and, oh, shoot, hold on, let's try that again. Navigation, right click, and then you can add a shortcut here. For me, I think assign a shortcut. So you can assign a shortcut, hit a button. I set it to Z. That's what I'm used to. Um, so just to clarify, I wanted to mention that because I feel like that hotkey is really nice to have and easy to use. So I'm going to bring in the files of the stuff that we exported out. So let's go. Oh, before I forget, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's actually add on that add-on that we, the plugin that we downloaded. So to do that, we're going to go to Edit, Preferences, go to where is it? Add-ons, Install, and then you'll go to the Downloads folder wherever you downloaded it from. I think it's like, yeah, I downloaded mine right here. You'll do Install Add-on, and then it should just pop up in the list right here. Let me actually try to find it. Should pop up in the list like this. All you got to do is make sure you hit the check mark, make sure it's on. You can go here to say Preferences, and then in your file import, you'll see at the bottom you'll have an Unreal PSK PSKX option. Okay, sorry about that. I had some mic issues. My mic and my headset turned off on its own because it actually ran for too long without hearing any audio, and it just turns off on its own. So I'm playing some sound in the background. You're not going to hear it in the video probably, but I'm playing some sound just to keep it from turning off. Anyway, let's actually import our model files now. So we'll go to the PSK, go to the file, import, PSK, go to our modding folder, FModel, output, exports, game, character, body parts. Okay. So now we can kind of make some decisions. The way that we're going to add a custom character is we're just going to replace one part of the character from the game and replace that with our entire model. Some of the custom model character mods that you've seen probably do something similar to this. Maybe in the future I'll cover how to do each of the individual parts, but for this example, we're just going to replace one part with our custom character, and I'm going to pick the upper body, and we'll do the t-shirt because I think this is probably just a really simple one to use. And then as far as import settings, you don't really need to change much at all here. So we'll import and we'll bring the model in, and it's a bit big, but that's okay. This is actually the right size, this is what it should be at. And yeah, so this is the t-shirt model from the game. As you can see, it's kind of in its like default pose, and these bones are really tiny, but we can actually fix that. If these are hard to see, you can click on the armature in the outliner here, go to the stick figure under data, or yeah, oh sorry, yeah, it's under here, and then you can go to the viewport display, display as stick, And that will probably make it a little bit easier for you to see where the bones are at, because this is the skeleton that we're going to bind everything to. So we'll bring the other pieces in now. We'll bring in the pants. We'll do the long loose pants. Okay. And then we'll do the head. And I want to actually, I'll bring in the head, but we're not going to need it per se, and you'll see why. Because the head is actually not quite part of the same exact skeleton. It has its own skeleton, or at least that's how it was made for the game. In our case, we don't actually really need the head. I'll go a bit more in depth on that later on. But for now, you don't necessarily need this. But it is helpful to have, if you want to like move it up to here and see like, oh, this is like roughly where the head is and stuff. But we don't actually need this. So we'll just undo that or delete it. I just undid it. Undo, by the way, is Control Z. If you like say move this over here and you didn't want to do that, you can hit Control Z and that'll undo your change. So we'll go to File, we'll go to Import, and we'll do the shoes. Which interestingly enough, the shoes are actually kind of a similar case. You can see that they're slightly misaligned, but it's using the same skeleton. Um, for our purposes, this will be good enough as far as the placement is concerned. If we wanted to fix this, well, we can fix this a bit later, because it's fairly easy to fix. But for now, just understand that this pose and this pose don't match up, so it's going to be a little weird because you can see that like the legs don't go quite into the shoes in the right way. So, just be wary of stuff like that um, when it comes to modding games, because sometimes you'll import something and it doesn't come out the way you expected, but you can still typically fix stuff in Blender. Anyway, what we're going to do is we're actually just going to get rid of, at least for now, we'll get rid of this armature because we don't actually need that armature. It's the copy of this one, but we only need the one armature that we're going to transfer over to. By the way, when I say armature, that just means the skeleton. Um, all these different points here represent different points in that skeleton. And the important one's this t-shirt one. This is like the game skeleton. We can't edit or change this at all. This has to stay the same for the game. We're just going to bind our character. We're going to pose them into this pose and then bind them to the skeleton basically to set up the model in Blender. And we'll cover all that. I guess in our case with uh, the shoes here, we can actually pose this a little bit, but we'll do that a bit later. So let's just go ahead and hide this for now. And also, by the way, if you want to hide something, when you hide something in Blender, it's just going to hide whatever you have specifically selected, so just the skeleton here. If you want to hide everything in one list, you can hold down Shift and left click on this, and it'll hide everything underneath this. So it'll hide the mesh here too. So we'll just keep that hidden for now. And let's also go ahead and make a save here. We'll save this. Oh, you might notice I actually made a tutorial folder for our project here. So under our projects, I'll call this RNA character tutorial. Just save our blend file there. So now we're going to bring in our custom character, and it's a bit tricky for us to kind of do this in this case because I'm actually pulling the character over from another blend file. You might have already seen it a little bit there just now. But let's go ahead and open that guy up. So I'm going to be replacing the character model from the game with this character from Mirror's Edge as well. This is the pursuit runner cops that chase after Faith midway through the game, kind of towards the end, sort of. Let's actually get out of this camera. Ooh, we're zooming. Okay. So the model that I picked is already set up pretty well. I'm not going to have to do very many edits in order to get this to work. I just deleted the camera, by the way, right there. I'm not going to have to do too many edits to get this to actually work because this is already a rigged model. It's already textured in Blender, which is great because that means that I can just export the textures out and it not be a big deal. For the most part, it looks like the materials are also set up correctly as well. I'll show all that kind of stuff in a little bit because there might be models that you have that either aren't rigged or they don't have the textures set up in Blender. So I'll kind of cover that a little bit. I'm not going to do it here, but I'll show you how you can do it. And there's also other YouTube guides on how to like easily rig a character that's not rigged if it's a humanoid shaped rig like this one is. So in our case, I'm actually going to append this blend file. I think that would be the easiest thing to do. So let's go back to our project here. File, append, and I'll just append this file over into here. I do actually everything. Oh, okay. Oh, you know what? I have a better idea. Let's go ahead and reopen. Let's actually open up another instance of Blender. So I'll right click in the bottom here and just hit Blender 4.1 again. This is going to open up a second copy so I can have um, two different windows open here. So let's go ahead and open up our Pursuit Cop again. Get out of that camera. And I'm just going to copy over, just select everything here, copy, and paste. Let's see, did that bring in everything though? It looks like it may have. Yes. Okay. So we have the textures copied over as well because they were in the blend file. You can see he's really tiny. We'll scale him up here in a second. But we don't need this open anymore, so we'll close out of that. So this skeleton, we're going to scale him up so that he's about the right size that he should be at. So to do that, I'm using hotkeys for this. My hotkeys for the industry standard compatible hotkeys are W for moving around, E for rotating, and then R for scaling, so I can make them all stretchy and I can like zoom them up and down like that, right? Um, for you, it might be different because if you're following the Blender hotkeys, if you watched a basic tutorial, it might be different than that. I believe that it's just S for the Blender hotkey, but I'm not entirely sure. If you don't know, though, you can just go onto the left-hand side here, click Scale, and then drag from the white circle to scale on all of the axes, the blue, the green, and the red, which is just X, Y, and Z, and you can see it in the top right here where there's this little icon right there. So we'll just scale this guy up and try to keep him roughly about where height of the character is, which I would say, it's probably like about right about here, maybe a little bit smaller than that. Yeah, like say somewhere around there or so. Not how it doesn't have to be super duper perfect. However long you spend on this in terms of like perfecting the exact height, is up to you. But I would say for the most part that this is like roughly right height, maybe a little smaller. By the way, if you want to like, so if you're dragging like this, it might be kind of hard to scale it this way. You can hold down shift and that'll fine tune your scaling. So if you hold down shift, it'll make it a little easier. And if you hold down control, it'll snap to whatever increments. You don't really need to use control. If you're holding down shift, that should scale it a little bit more easily for you to, position it a little bit better. Um, okay. Yeah, I'd say like maybe right about there. Probably roughly the position that it needs to be at. I might make adjustments to the scale as we go along, as I pose the model, but for now we'll just kind of like start here, maybe a little bit bigger. Yeah, we'll kind of start there. So from here, we are going to hide our skeleton. I'm actually going to hide the pursuit cop. I'm holding down shift when I do this, by the way, so I can hide everything. In my case, I prefer when I'm working with models like this, I'm trying to line up the mesh. Um, the closer you can get the original model to the mesh that we're copying over to, the better. Um, some cases, it actually might be better for you to not use like a big open long shirt like this. If we go back to importing uh, from our FModel export here, Maybe later on, if the developer adds in new options for the basic default clothing, there actually might be better options here. A lot of the upper body clothing pieces are very bulky clothing pieces, which makes it a little bit trickier with models that might have like humans with this kind of like more um, form-fitting clothing and stuff like that, which we'll get into later on why that's important. But for now, I think the t-shirt's a pretty good place to start as far as like a mesh to pick. Anyway, I'm going to turn this into a wireframe, or in the viewport, I'm going to turn it into a wireframe display just to make it easier for me to see what I'm doing. So we can click on this little object square icon, viewport display, display as wire. Then it's going to look like this. It'll make it a little easier to see through and adjust things for the model, for the uh, runner cop here, right? So from here, we're actually going to learn a little bit about how to pose the model. Or actually, I think before we get into that, let's actually cover some things that you might want to know if you have a model that's not like this, but it might be something where it's like just a model that looks like this and it's all flat and doesn't look textured and anything. By the way that I'm previewing the material is going into viewport shading and it pops up like that, or I can go into this view and it's just like just the mesh and the geometry and everything like that. So let's kind of cover that at least for a little bit. So if I click on this model, I can go into the shading tab and I can actually view in here how the materials are set up. Now in my case, I actually have the mesh, or I have the model split into two different mesh pieces. I have the model um, for the badge right here. And then I also have a model for the just the whole entire runner cop, right? And you might notice that this is split up into different textures. Like if I click on this image, you can see it's this big, large texture. It looks like this. And then we have one where it is like a clothing tile and it's being overlaid and stuff like that. This is just adding kind of like normal map details, it looks like to some extent, or it's kind of overlaying it on top of the clothing there. Then we have a mask for the specular, and we have one for the roughness right here. Um, the important ones that really we care about the most will probably be just the color. So the one that looks like this. We care about the specular because we can input that into Unreal Engine 5. We have the roughness, and then we also have the normal map. Now the normal map is interesting because it looks like it's actually by default inverted. So we might need to fix this in Photoshop maybe, but for now we'll just stick with the way that it's being outputted. Like if we see, I forget what the display for this is. I think it's control. Uh, I have like an add-on that lets me preview what the output looks like here. Um, Not that. Well, actually, that is kind of what I wanted, sort of. Let's go actually here. So yeah, the looks like they took the RGB values and just inverted them because uh, this comes from a game engine that's also Unreal Engine, I think. But the way it got exported was that the colors, I think, got inverted, or the green channel actually got inverted. So if you see, if I take this invert color and I swap it down like this, you can see that the top of the helmet looks a little weird now, like it doesn't kind of look right. And then when I set it back, now it looks more like how it should. So this green channel is actually being inverted inside of Blender, um, which should be okay because we can change this later on. I might actually open up Photoshop here to make adjustments to this later, but just things to know, depending on the complexity of the model that you're going to do, these are things that you should probably look into. And as far as texturing the model goes, like if you have the model, but it doesn't have a material assigned to it, let me show that briefly here. If you click on it, you'll click on the material icon on the bottom here. It's this little checker box sphere, and you'll see that there's all these different material slots. You can add a material slot right here, and then hit new, and then create a material. And if you go into shading, there will be a new principled BSDF shader, and then you can just put whatever you need to into that shader, and it should just work for the most part. Like your base color is just the color map, and then you have the specular right here that you can input as well. This is like, I think, the new principled BSDF. I believe there is the older one, or maybe not. Hold on, let me double check something. Oh, okay, it's actually not, specular isn't being attached. That's interesting. Hmm, okay. Well, never mind. We're not going to worry too much about the specular map anyway, but it would be nice for us to... Oh, maybe that's where it's under higher levels. Or maybe it's under tint. Usually there's options to like input this kind of stuff, but it doesn't matter that much. The main one that I would say matters more in this case is the roughness, making sure we have that. Specular is like sort of a small detail thing. Like we're not going to have to worry too much about that. And by the way, some of this stuff might not even show up in game. So again, not super duper important stuff to talk about here, but I thought I should bring some of this stuff up. Also, I guess I should mention something else. A lot of times your color map and the color space should be sRGB, including some stuff like this. I guess it's using that. But a lot of times for information, like a specular texture map or roughness or normal map, these are all going to be non-color spaces. If you don't set this to non-color and you set it to like sRGB, which it will be by default if you just drag the texture in, it might not show up correctly. Like now the normal map looks really weird and it's doing this like weird thing up here. So we have to make sure to set it to non-color so that it shows up correctly. Like it'll show up like this, but in actuality, the texture will probably look more like what this looks like in Photoshop. So this doesn't look wrong, by the way. This is what it'll look like in Photoshop, but the way that Blender handles it, it'll make the texture look um, more like this, where it's lighter in color. Okay. Anyway, let's say, for instance, though, that you have a model, and let's say it doesn't have a skeleton at all. Oh, I don't want to delete that. Why is it deleting? Oh, because these are parented. Okay. How can I delete these? I thought I could delete the skeleton here and it would not take out everything else, but... Oh, I know why, because it's scaling these. So let's say, for instance, if I were to delete the skeleton, let's say I delete the skeleton and this isn't rigged anymore. Or let's say you get a model that looks like this, but it's not rigged. Like there's no skeleton here, there's no little stickman icon, right? What do you do then? So what you can do is you can take that model and you can go to Mixamo and make an account here and stuff. I'm not going to showcase how to do that. There's guides for this. But this is a site you can go to easily rig a character using its auto rigger. If the character is like a 3D, is a humanoid character, like a human shaped character, um, and it'll make the process, it'll streamline a lot of stuff for you. You won't have to rig it inside a Blender or anything like that. It just makes things easier to do. It's like an automatic rigger type thing. So I would use Mixamo if you don't have it rigged. If you're a total beginner, or you could use Rigify, but I'm not going to cover that. There's other guides that you can look up to use Rigify. If you'd rather do it inside a Blender. So yeah, a couple options for you there. If you don't have it rigged, but since I already do have it rigged, kind of saves me a step. Okay, so let's say we have the model ready to go. Like I don't really start with adding the custom character till I know like, okay, I have this and this and this. Actually, in our case, let's actually fix a couple things about the model before I jump into. I know I'm like delaying over and over, right? Let's actually go ahead and export out these textures here, these TGA textures. So I want to unpack this. Let's see. We want to use file in current directory. Yeah, so what it's going to do here, because of how this Blender file was made, it was actually packed into the blend file. So if I go to, second here, if I go to the projects folder, I go to the tutorial, it'll make a textures folder here, and this is where these textures are going to get sent to because they were packed in the blend file originally. So we just need to unpack these, and they should stay linked for us. And we'll do the same one. We need to do one for here. Looks like we do. Then we also have this one here, which I think it looks like all of them. Yeah, you see the little icon for the folder. If it doesn't look the same across all of them, I think we're good to go. Yeah, okay. So small thing I'm actually going to do here though. I'm going to take the normal map and I'm going to take it into Photoshop and do one thing that's going to change it. But you can also do in GIMP and Krita, but I'll cover it in Photoshop because that's just what I know. So we'll go open with Photoshop. And I have the 2020 version, by the way. Old version of Photoshop, but it still works for me, so I'm going to stick with. Okay. So what we need to do is actually invert the green color channel because we had to do it within Blender. I'd rather just do it from within Photoshop just to fix it manually before we take it into Unreal because I don't want to have there be any weird shenanigans where you have to invert the color channel in Unreal itself. I'd rather just stick the stick the texture in, link it, and be done. So to do that, all we're going to do is go to the green channel here. So you'll see under layers, there might be something similar to this in Krita or GIMP, but under layer, um, right now it'll look like this. So we'll go to channels, go to the green channel, and then I'm just going to select everything and do invert or control I under adjustments. And it doesn't look too different, right, if I highlight all the colors, but I did invert the green channel. So now we'll go back and we'll just hit save on this. You can also save stuff as PNG if you're working with a model that has opacity, like hair and things like that. I think it's easier to save that stuff as a PNG and bring it over into Unreal. But most game engines accept TGA and prefer TGA. But TGAs are also a bit larger in file size, so it's just kind of you know, use whatever you think works best. If you don't really know what texture to output something as a PNG, JPEG, TGA, all that stuff, just stick with PNG if you don't know what to use. So we'll reopen this. So now you can see it's actually re-inverted again because I inverted that color. So now all we really need to do now is just delete all that and we'll just link the color into here and now we're good to go again. So that's just to fix again, that's just to fix the issues that we had before with the green channel being inverted like that. I would rather just fix this stuff in the texture itself because it's just one texture in our case. It's pretty easy to change. Okay, so now we are pretty much good to go as far as getting this guy into the right pose. We'll do file save. Okay, let me actually check one thing here. Okay, I just wanted to check to see how long we were going for. This video is going to be long. All right, so now we're going to start with posing this guy. Let's go ahead and bring in our t-shirt skeleton, that, and the pants. Again, we're just kind of using this as sort of a guideline. Small thing I'll add too, you can actually change stuff. So if you don't want to like keep selecting the mesh by accident like this, like if I'm trying to select something in here and I select the t-shirt by accident like that, you can go up and add a new restriction toggle and click this little arrow one, and then you can toggle off the ability to select things in the viewport. So now if I try to click this, it's not going to work. So small thing, I think it helps. Let's do the same thing for the pants so I don't accidentally select those. So really all we're going to do now is we're going to just line up the rig that we have for our our pursuit cop with the hands and stuff like that, and arms and body of this of the original character, right? So in our case, because this model isn't rigged properly, it doesn't have IK and stuff like that, we're going to have to move stuff bone by bone. The nice part about this, though, is it looks like it is named in a way where we can mirror stuff. So small thing, right? What you need to do to pose stuff like this is click on the skeleton, go to object mode and change it to pose mode. In my case, I'm going to hit a hotkey a lot of the time, which is going to be 3. I hit 3 twice actually to make it work because Blender 4.1 did some changes. But now if I move this arm around, you can see it's moving the model around, right? I'm moving around the arm roll, which I don't really need to do. We need to move around the arm. And all I'm going to do is just try to pose him up in place. Now it looks like it's actually, so in our case, we have a little bit of a problem here. We have a problem of the model mirroring kind of in a way where this side is being inverted. So, unfortunately, we can't really use the mirror option that easily. So we'll kind of have to just sort of eyeball this as best as we can. Or if we're rotating stuff, we can look at the value here and copy it to the other side and to the other bone. That's what I kind of do if I'm doing it sort of manually like that. So we'll go ahead and also, by the way, to put it in like an orthographic view like this, I just kind of click on the spot that I want to go to on the little wheel here. So let's undo. So we'll change this to like right about there, just to line it up a little bit. Same thing right about here. Oh, gotta remember it's inverted, so just get rid of the plus, or the minus, make it a plus. So it's like that. It actually might not be like these arms might not be like totally uh asymmetrical. Like I might be able to actually like move the shoulder pieces back maybe. I guess not. Okay, never mind. Just turn that off. I don't think there's a way for me to mirror this. Actually, relative mirror might work better. Let's see. Yeah, no, that's not what I want either. Oh, you know what? We could also, by the way, I'm just kind of like seeing some settings here. We might be able to use auto IK. Let's see. I doubt this is gonna work, but I'm just gonna try this just to see if it does, in all honesty. Yeah, no, I don't think it's gonna work. It's kind of what I thought was gonna happen. So, yeah. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Okay, that's fine. I didn't think that would actually work, but that's okay. Actually, let's see. Effect location. Let's see if I turn mirroring on now, if that actually does what I... Oh, nope, that is not doing what I wanted to do at all. Okay. Well, unfortunately, we're just going to have to work with posing it sort of manually in place. It's going to be a bit of a pain, but we'll just work with it. If you'd rather not try to do it this way, you could also just take this model, bring it into Mixamo, and it will rig it better than the current rig is set up like this. But in my case, I'm just going to stick it out and work with it as is. So I'm actually going to move a little bit back just to keep him a bit more in line, I think. 'Cause he's a little bit, like a little bit too far forward, but I think that's good right about there. Um, okay. So we'll move this arm. Also, by the way, we're going to actually change the axis that we rotate this on to local, which is right here. You can change the transform orientation. This is just to make sure that when we're rotating something, we can rotate it like along the, the arm like this. Just makes things easier. So we'll rotate that into place and we'll copy that value and paste it to the other side. And we'll put a negative here. Oh, I guess we don't need to put a negative there, just over. Cool. All right, so from here, let's see. So this is kind of what might happen a lot of the time when you're posing a model. You might find that like, oh, the arm is like a little bit too short, or like the legs are a bit too long, or whatever, right? So kind of here's where you're sort of making like micro adjustments. Like I might take the scaling down just a little bit to keep the arms maybe better aligned, that sort of stuff. I want to like put it maybe right about there. Um, and I'm also going to go ahead and scale the arm a little bit more here. Actually, this up, like, right about there. So we'll do this for the other arm. Make sure we select the right bone. Put a negative at the end of this. Oh, actually, I think we need to just keep it positive. Okay. You can kind of just like flip-flop and whatever looks right. You just go with that. And let's see, if I move this down, yeah, it's going to do that. Actually, let's go ahead and undo the. I'm going to be like kind of like making changes on the fly here, so in case you guys are wondering. We don't need to get this exactly aligned, but it would be helpful to get it as close as we possibly can, because it's going to make the part where we need to transfer the model over a lot less work for us to do. So the better we can make this, the better, basically. So we'll keep it. Well, it's not perfectly lined up, but we'll keep it right there. I think that's like a good spot to put it in. And now I want to go ahead and make the upper, or I'll start with the upper arm first. Let's see. That's the roll. So we'll start with the upper arm and make it a bit bigger. Make that, we'll put that to this scale. And then we'll do the same for the other side. We'll just copy, paste those values in like that. And then we'll scale from the forearm a little bit. Let's see. Might have to bring it out a little bit more. You want to make the scaling look natural, right? So we'll scale it out a tiny little bit. Well, there. Do the same thing. And we'll make the hand a bit larger as well. Put it like right there for now. Again, we might be tweaking this stuff a little bit here and there. I would say for the most part, like make sure you do all the tweaking that you can before you try to like rig or add on, before you try to bind the model over. I would try to do as many changes as you can to pose the model as best as you can into the proper position that you want it to be in, right? So, just again for clarification on that. We'll drag out the arm. Or yeah, we drag out the hand a little bit. We'll drag it like about that far, and we'll copy it for this side. Make sure we select the right bone. You can see in the top left right here, the bone that you have selected. So that's what I'm looking at when I'm looking up here. And this is negative, so we got to make sure to put a negative number. And I'll also drag out the forearm a little bit as well along this axis here, along the red axis. And we'll do it for side. Get rid of the negative so it comes out. Okay, that's a decent spot for that, I would say. Actually, let's see. If I bring down the left arm, maybe bring up. I just want to see what this looks like if I change it like this. Hmm. Yeah, that might be good to do. So we bring this down a little bit. Copy it for this side. Like that. And then we rotate this arm up to kind of match the shape of that a little bit better. Rotate. Negative. Oh, I guess we don't need a negative there actually. Okay. So you can kind of see we're sort of getting close to the right kind of pose a little bit here. again, you want to make micro adjustments, I feel like, for this. This is like pretty important that you get this lined up as best as you possibly can if you're trying to make um a good replacement. Now, again, depending on the model that you're using, or that you're replacing with, maybe in your case, you're doing like, I don't know, Peter Griffin from Fortnite or something. In that case, you don't have to worry too much about trying to match stuff, right? You want to kind of get maybe the right like shape-ish, I would say, like sort of the right shape. But in our case, because our model closely matches like what the human shape in the game already is, we do want to kind of try to match as close as we can because we want the details of the fingers and all the animations to be visible. So, excuse me. All right. Let's go to the legs now. Let's do with the legs. Also, by the way, pro tip, you can click on a bone and then click up or down the chain like this. So this is going up the chain. We'll go to, well, like we can click on this bone and then go to the leg hip here, and then we can drag this and kind of pose it sort of the right spot it needs to be in, right? So let's see, can I mirror this? Nope. Actually, well, relative mirror. I know that's not going to do anything for me. Okay, so we'll, oh, I have that enabled still. So we'll drag this out to like right about there. Or actually, before we do that, let's actually pose the leg bent, the leg bending right here. So we'll kind of like go maybe like right about there. We'll flip around to the other side. We copied that, by the way. Hit Control C to copy. Do this side. It's negative this time. It's actually going to be a negative number. Paste it in. It's kind of nice of Blender to do that for us. It already knows what we're trying to do. Oh, let me go back. Let's see. We'll click on that bone there. Go into Ortho Review again, and then we'll rotate so that the leg is mostly flat on the ground. Copy that value. Flip around to the other side. Grab that bone and pose it back down this way. Okay, so now we have that leg bent spot. We might adjust that leg still a little bit here, but let's bring out the leg to about here. Do the same. By the way, all these extra bones that are in here, we don't have to worry about this stuff. All this stuff, like you might see extra bones on the models and stuff like that that you end up using. Don't worry too much about all that. That stuff doesn't apply to the skeleton that we're going to bring this guy over to anyway. Um, okay, and now we kind of have to pose the feet a little bit more. I actually think we need to bring the leg and make it a little bit bigger, just a little bit, like right about maybe there. And we'll stretch this guy's leg out a little bit. Again, we're just scaling up from this bone to pose it, right? Okay. Then we are going to go, and we can actually rotate based on the camera perspective by just rotating from this white circle here. So we'll just do that like that. You can see how its orientation is from the view when we do that. So the actual view angle that we're, uh, you know, copying over from. And let's go ahead and bring back in the shoes. Actually, yeah, okay, so I'm bringing back the shoes in because, well, actually, now that I think about it, let's not worry about that. Let's actually bring back the model in. Or let's bring in the game skeleton. So we can see the game skeleton here now. It's like these other little black, um, little, sticks here. I'm actually going to take the foot and rotate it. Let's get an upper angle here, or maybe from below. I'm going to rotate this foot so that this green bone is kind of facing in the same general direction down the foot towards this bone right here. So you can see this green bone is kind of like going into this little black spot. That's the game's skeleton for where this foot is supposed to like kind of bend. So we're just kind of like, putting it right about there, thereabouts or so. to try to sort of match where the ball of the feet are on the character that we're copying over to. Um, oh, I actually undid the change. Let's go back to view, rotate it around. Okay, so now we have that. Select the left foot, same thing, but invert it. So we'll get rid of the negative. And there we go. So now we have the feet posed. We have the legs posed. We have the like the upper body mostly posed. So now we're gonna do the hands, and this is like kind of the sort of torturous part when we're doing this because now we have to deal with a lot more bones here. Small thing I'm gonna tell you guys to do: make sure you save often. Like you can hit Control S to save. But another really key thing that you definitely want to make sure you do is go to your keyframes down here and go ahead and just insert a keyframe like on the timeline like this. Um, or, well, actually, that didn't work for me. If I hit, let's see, where is, should be a way to like make a keyframe here. We'll just type in, yeah. By the way, if you want to see how I got that menu, you can just hit F3 to bring this up. Type in keyframe, insert keyframe. Looks like it's supposed to probably be like somewhere in here, like right click and then insert keyframes. You just do all channels. Hit, maybe I have to hit enter for that or something. I don't know. But the reason I say to insert a keyframe in here is because if you don't insert a keyframe in, I'm going to do this just as an example, right? And I'm going to undo this when I do it. If I move the timeline, or actually, let me actually do this. But actually, I really don't want to lose this pose, so we're going to do this safely. Um, if I don't insert a keyframe and I move this timeline at all, what's going to happen is it's going to reset the pose back to 0. It's going to look like this. It's going to look like it's a rest pose. If I didn't have that keyframe here, it wouldn't stay in this pose. So when you're posing it, make sure that if you want to save the keyframe, you either hit File Save, and in case you hit the timeline and undo it, like actually as an example, let me just show you guys. So if I like save this, I could delete the keyframe and I move the timeline, it should, oh, well, actually in our case, it's not doing what I expected it to do. Maybe they changed that in this version of Blender. Huh, interesting. Anyway, guess you don't have to worry about it. Maybe in older versions of Blender, I would be wary of that, but in this newer version, I guess it doesn't really matter that much. I would still definitely play it safe, maybe insert a keyframe anyway, but I guess you don't have to if you don't want to. Anyway, let's go back to the hand here. We're gonna pose our hand. This we kind of just want to like when we're posing a hand, we don't have to get it exactly perfect, but it is nice if we can kind of like get it somewhat the shape that we need to go for here. So we'll copy that over to this side on the local axis. Yeah, see. I was hoping the mirror editing actually would work, but I don't think it does. I think it's just going to, yeah, it's not gonna do, it's not gonna do what I want it to do. Sorry. I was like trying something out right there. Let's go ahead and make the hand a little bit bigger, like maybe like right about, that's actually looks a little weird, that big. Let's just do like, maybe about that big. So we'll copy this over to this side. By the way, there's a lot of different ways you can do things in Blender. There might be a better way to do this than how I'm doing it, but this is just kind of what I know currently. So this is how I want to do things. So for hands, we're not going to worry too much about rotating stuff perfectly along the axes. We can just grab anywhere in here and just kind of rotate it sort of into the right spot. I think for hands, if you want to just eyeball stuff, you kind of can. I don't think it's super duper important because you're not going to see the hands too much unless you're like playing in first person a lot. And even then, sometimes the actual animations in the game break the hands. So even then, like, again, you don't have to keep things perfect, but the more accurately aligned you can make something, the better. So again, just bear that in mind. Like if you want to go for a mod and you want to make it super ultra accurate and stuff, I would definitely spend more time than what I'm going to be doing here, since I'm doing kind of everything sort of in real time. Um, but again, you know, however much time you choose to spend on this is up to you. So, let's go ahead and kind of down a little bit that way. Bring this finger down. Let's actually go back to this bone. Put that way. That bone like that. Actually bring the pinky out a little bit. That kind of get the right sort of angle. Okay, so we kind of have a slight problem. The hand is like sort of like weirdly positioned here. I'm going to try my best to line this up, but it's going to be a little tricky for me to do because of how the hand's pinky finger is like kind of positioned here. From the original game, by the way, I'm kind of referring to. Gonna put this along like that. Let's see. We can actually probably fix this up a little bit more. We can bring up the forearm a tad. About there. I'll do the same thing for the other side here at least. Keep that stuff lined up. I want to at least keep the arms and like the major body pieces lined up, but the hands and stuff, I'm just gonna kind of eyeball the fingers. I'm not going to um, be too picky about this. Now, this is just with my current rig, right? If I were to make like a proper rig where I can very easily like move and post stuff around, I might actually spend um, more time trying to line it up because it'd be easier to do it that way. It'd be easier to line things up. But for the purpose of me trying to not take too ultra long doing this, which I am kind of already going into an hour, so um, you know, with me wanting to sort of try to keep this a bit shorter, you know, that's just me trying to explain away why I'm like, trying to take more time. Let's actually just kind of speed through this, sort of taking a little bit longer than I'd like. I'm just kind of rambling now. Right there. Maybe that up a little bit here. That down. This back up a little bit. That down again. Okay, that's kind of good right there, I'd say. Let's go ahead and kind of pose the key out a little bit more. Is that kind of right? Nope, that's a little harsh of an angle. That little here. We can actually also move a bone if we want to like kind of move the mesh out a little bit. I think that's also helpful to do sometimes as far as like trying to get the perfect kind of pose going on. That kind of down, kind of like undershoot it a little bit, but for the most part. Okay, so I'd say this is pretty well lined up for the most part. All right, so we're done with that. We're done with posing. Let's talk about how to actually get our pursuit cop, over to um over to this model here, or over to this skeleton here. This is the skeleton that we're transferring over to. All right. So first thing we're gonna do, we're gonna hide our cop here, and we're gonna bring back our. We We could like pose the sneakers again, but I don't know how helpful that would actually be. I did mention it though earlier, so let's see. Would that actually help us out if we move these over? Why is this not moving? I feel like this should be moving, but surprisingly. Oh, it's because I have the t-shirt selected. Oops. Uh, that bone. Oh, wait. There we go. Okay, so let's move that, that. Where is our bone moving? Oh, wait, is it because we're selecting the whole thing? Oh, wait, that's kind of odd. Hold on one second. Oh, we're in edit mode. I'm sorry. Even I sometimes forget stuff like simple things. Let's actually just grab all these bones. So we'll move that over. Actually, can we pose mirror this? Nope. So we'll just kind of eyeball it. So we'll move this over right about there. That like right about there. Okay. So that's kind of like the um, shoes kind of lined up to where they probably should be on the actual model, like that. I'm going to go ahead and toggle back on the selection options here. We'll go ahead and we'll swap off the viewport display that I had. So we'll change this to textured again. Same thing for this one. So what we're going to do now is we're going to merge the models, the pants, the shoes, to the t-shirt model here. And in order to do that, we're going to unparent the sneakers skeleton from itself so that we can bring this over into here and join them together. I mean, we could also, I think, select this and maybe join it. But you can see how there's like an offset that happens, so we kind of don't want to do that if we can't help it. So what we want is to select this, go to Object, Parent, then Clear and Keep Transformation. And so this will clear it, so now we can get rid of this skeleton. Actually, oh, that didn't clear it fully though, did it? That's strange. Hold on a second. Ah, wait, is it because we're trying to join it? Ew, okay, I see. We're trying to join it. It's not scaled correctly, I think. Hold on one second. Thinking about this in my head. Oh, yeah. Let's see, apply all transforms. I'll cover this in a second. Is that joining? No. Okay, it's still not joining. Why is this not joining? Shouldn't be an issue. I don't think. Wonder if it's because I still have the skeleton in there somehow and it's not unparenting properly. Hold on one second. Let me just back up here to when it was still parented and underneath the thing like that. Actually, you know what we can do? We can actually just right click, go to convert to mesh, and then that should also, I think, yeah, that should keep it from parenting like we were talking about earlier. So we can just do the same thing here too. Convert to mesh, and actually, well, we got rid of the skeleton for that earlier, so it doesn't matter. Let's see, can I join this now? There we go, that's what we wanted. So now the model is all one piece like this. So now we can hide and unhighlight stuff. And by the way, to join pieces together, you can control, left click, select, and then go to the piece you want all these pieces to join into and just hit J. Or if you don't know what that is, you can also go to Object, Join. It's right there. So the reason we do this is because what we're going to do is we're going to transfer what are called vertex groups over from the default model, and we're going to place that onto the pursuit cop model, or the mesh rather, that looks like this, right? We're going to transfer over essentially vertex data so that this skeleton can use, or rather, this mesh rather, can use this skeleton. And one other thing I'm going to do as well is I'm going to join. Eh, well, nah, I don't necessarily need to do that. Never mind. Well, actually, I think just for the sake of making it easier, I'm going to go ahead and join the badge with the mesh on the pursuit cop. So the pursuit cop is all one mesh now. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this pursuit cop. First of all, we don't need the skeleton for the pursuit cop anymore. But I would recommend to keep a backup in your blend project just in case you want to make adjustments. So in our case, I'm going to go ahead and just hit Control D to duplicate. Or you can also go to, I think, probably like object. Yeah, duplicate objects right there. And this is just a backup. So we'll call this backup and we'll just unhide all that stuff. So we'll just keep it in the project just in case, but we don't necessarily need it for anything. Anyway. So now what we're going to do is we are going to do the same thing we did where we get rid of the skeleton on this. We're going to go convert to mesh and then delete the skeleton. Or, well, I think we actually do need to unparent this. So object, parent, here and keep transforms, delete the skeleton. There we go. And one last thing we're going to do as well is we're going to clear all the vertex groups that this cop had. So we'll go to the data tab and you'll see all these different vertex groups in the right side here. We'll just click the little drop down arrow and do delete all groups. That will get rid of all the groups. So now what we're going to do is we are going to bind our character over by copying the vertex group data from this over to this. So to do that, we're going to click on the mesh and go to this little wrench icon for modifiers, add modifier, go to, where is it? It would be under edit data transfer. So we're going to select our t-shirt as the source. Looks like t-shirt 001 specifically, I guess, in this case. We'll click on vertex data, click the drop down, click on vertex groups, mapping, nearest face interpolated is the best option. So we'll click that one. And from here, we're also going to add another modifier to this. We're going to add a armature modifier under deform. And it's going to be so what this the purpose of this is, we can actually go look at the t-shirt model here and you can see that this also has an armature deform modifier. That basically just means that it's supposed to be bound to the skeleton more or less in Blender. So we'll go and we'll set the armature of t-shirt, is what it's called, to here. And then one last thing, we'll hit generate data layers. And it should be pretty quick, it should happen like pretty much instantly. And so now, if we try to move around, if I go to pose mode, we try to move around the model, now we can see that our cop is moving alongside it. But if I start to move it too crazily, it gets really weird. This is just because we need to actually apply the modifier to, we need to apply the data transfer modifier to the mesh. So we're just going to go up into this little arrow here, click apply, and now if we were to move this around, it's not going to get all weird on us. Okay, so now we can have our cop move around with the skeleton of the player character from the game, which is pretty much exactly what we wanted. And for the most part, it looks like it actually got the rigging pretty well, at least on the legs here. We probably don't have to make many adjustments to this. So not too many anyway. That's the base there. We got our legs, looking very leg-like. Where we'll probably have issues is around in the hands, because again, like before, we didn't really like pose the hands perfectly, so it might get a little funky. Some spots would look a little weird and janky when we bend the fingers, but for the most part, it's kind of accurate. And then we have the head. Head actually looks pretty good. I'm surprised at how well it got the head here. It's not perfect. Like if I turn this way, you can see the head like shrinks down. We'll have to fix that. But I'll show you guys how to. And then the neck, the neck is okay. Could be a bit better. We have the clavicle, which is part of the shoulder, like here, and then the shoulder bit, or the upper arm rather. We have the spines. We'll just try these out. So yeah, for the most part, it got our rigging and our weighting pretty well. Also, don't worry too much about these bones. These are just like sort of default bones for like, I guess Unreal to use. You don't have to really worry about those bones at all. Okay, so let's go ahead and save. All right, so next step is we need to tweak this model a little bit, and we need to do something called weight painting. So weight painting, just to try to explain it as best as I can, is the process of basically telling the model and telling the model which bones it should use to bend what parts, basically. So if I were to say click on this bone, nope, not that bone. If I were to click on this foot bone, you can see that most of the model here is blue, but sections down here are red. This basically just tells us that this red part has more influence over controlling the foot than these blue parts up here do. And the reason that's important is just simply because we don't want to say move this bone and have it move like the arm up here at the same time. That would look weird, right? So the whole point of us to make these tweaks is to try to fine tune stuff and fix little things like this, like weird deformities that happen if we can try to fix it in places. Um, the data transfer thing that we did does a pretty good job depending on the shape of your character, right? If it matches closely to the character from the game, it's going to do a pretty darn good job of matching it up near perfectly. But there might be weird things like this, for example. So red defines something that has total complete influence. Basically, that just means these red parts will always move with this bone, or always try to move with this bone when it moves around. But the less red it gets, the less it's going to move around. Um, so when you think about it, we would probably expect this head to be entirely red, right? Because this bone is supposed to move the whole head. And you'd be right in thinking that because if I turn the head like this, it squishes down and it looks really weird and doesn't look right. Um, so instead of moving the skeleton around manually like this and trying to tweak things, a pretty easy way to test out if your model is going to look correct in game before you do all the work of importing it into an Unreal project and testing a bunch of stuff or testing it all in game, is to test it here in Blender because we can actually take those animation files that we exported a long, long time ago and bring it onto the model. So we'll go to File, Import PSA, and we're going to look for the FModel folder again, Exports, Game, go to Main folder, Content, Animations, and I like to test the what you call it. We'll go to Tricking, Illusion Twist. This is it. Make sure you pick the right one. It's Illusion Twist, not AM Illusion Twist. And we'll just import that. Looks like we actually have a bit of an issue here, which is interesting. I didn't expect that to happen. This is new. Hold on. What is it saying? Missing bones. We're missing bones? Oh, wait a second. Hold on one second. Not importing because I'm missing bones? That's odd. I've never seen that before. Oh, wait, hold on. I think I can probably change a setting in here. Um, Overwrite sequence advanced. Case insensitive. Exact. Fake user. Let's try taking this off. Okay, well, it's still not working for us. Hold on one second, guys. I want to actually pause the video here, and then I'll come back and I'll explain something once I get this figured out. All right, be right back. Okay, so I figured it out. The way that the plugin actually works now is different than the older versions of Blender and the plugin I used to use. So the way that we have to do this now, which is actually a few more steps, I'm not a huge fan of it. We'll click on the skeleton. We'll go to pose mode. We'll hit Control A to select all the bones, or you can also go up to let's see, select all right here, and then we'll add a keyframe, and we can search for that here. Just say insert keyframe, and Once we have that done, we'll go to the nonlinear animation editor. So you click on the little clock symbol. You can change this so that we can change it from the timeline over to the nonlinear animation editor right here. And then we'll have a t-shirt action that gets created, and we need to change this action to a different one. Um, so we actually, well, I think we want to push down the action, and then we can change this. Let's see, add action. Oh, my bad. We actually need to import the. Forgot we need to actually import the animation. So bring in the PSA, import. It'll give us a little warning. That's okay. Go to add action, illusion twist, and then we can get rid of that track by just clicking on it, right click, hit delete tracks. Okay, so after all that, we have the animation. Looks like this. So we can play it. Actually, what we'll do, we'll keep the nonlinear animation editor up so you can actually see it going through the animation like this, right? So I like to use the illusion twist for testing things and just making sure that our weight painting looks kind of good in places because this is a pretty intense animation, right? Like it's kind of spinning around in the air, all the limbs are going everywhere. So the more kind of crazy the pose gets, the better it is for tweaking to make sure that the character lines up the best that it can with the animation. So what we can do is we can select the skeleton first. We're in object mode, by the way. You gotta make sure in object mode to select stuff. Select this in object mode, and then we'll shift click to select the mesh, and then we'll go over into weight paint. And if we scroll through the timeline, we can actually see that we have the head bone selected here. We'll select that and we can see where like deformations are going to start to happen. So like this head is shrinking down during the spin and we don't want that. So let's use some weight painting to fix that. So what we can do is we have a little brush icon under draw and we're going to just draw on the weights that it should be at. So um, just to kind of go over this crash course a little bit, our draw brush is what I would normally stick to. You can have the weight set to 1 or the weight set to 0. I would only keep it between 1 and 0 to either remove weight paint, or like to remove an area, or add more weight to an area. And you can play around with the strength to adjust how much you're weight painting something. So if I was going to say weight paint this little spot right up here, if I start drawing on, you see how it kind of like gets added on slowly, right, over time. That's weight painting with the option set to like the strength set to like 0.2, right? If you set this all the way to 1, the moment you click, it's going to turn red. But before you do any of that too, you want to make one change in your options menu. We're going to set this to auto normalize. And what this is going to try to do is it's going to try to adjust the vertex groups of other things that other bones might be weighted to. For example, this neck bone, right, has influence over the head where it shouldn't. So what's going to happen is when I weight paint with this bone selected like this, it's going to remove the vertex group weight painting off here. So this will become more dark blue. This will, as I paint more red onto here. Having auto normalize turned on just makes things easier as far as like trying to make adjustments, like minor adjustments. So that's why I recommend it. For me, by the way, to change the brush size, I just hit S to change the scaling. I'm not exactly sure what the Blender default hotkey is, but you can probably look that up. If you like say go to like not there, but um in here, if you want to actually change the radius, you can just alter this so you can change that bar and it'll get bigger and smaller. But I like to be able to see how big it gets when I change it that way. So anyway, we have to also check another thing, make sure front faces only is turned on. Otherwise, if we have this turned off, we'll actually paint through the mesh. So we'll paint through the side of the head and it'll paint on this side too. We might not want that all the time. And the fall off you can also mess with. I really only mess with these two settings, sphere or projected. I usually just tend to keep it on sphere though, for the most part. And then stroke, you don't really have to change anything here, and you don't have to change this at all really either. So also, I would keep the blend on mix. All right, so now that we covered all that, we'll start painting. And you can see as I'm painting, it's already starting to like change shape, right? It's deforming. I'm actually going to turn the strength up a little bit. And here's an instance where I actually might want to turn front faces only off because I want to be able to paint through like these bars and stuff like that on the I guess face shield, right? So we'll go to brush and turn front faces only off, and that'll make it so that I'm painting directly through the model to the other side, like this. We'll turn the strength up to like, say, we'll turn the strength up to 1. So this whole area up here should definitely be weight painted to the head. Um, we'll turn the strength back down, and we'll just kind of like brush over this, right? We'll sort of just brush over the sides. By the way, if you find that you're brushing, I actually expected this side to be painted. If you don't see that happening, change the fall off to projected, and if I paint through this now, it should be painting through. Yeah, now it's painting through. So just kind of paint over this. We can turn the strength up a little bit, I think. I'll change the fall off back to here, sphere, and we'll just kind of, and just sort of best judgment, right? We're just kind of like trying to see what looks best, right? Because if we weight paint this head too much, then it's not going to bend that far with the animation. So it's kind of a game of determining what looks best depending on the animation, which I think that looks a lot better. It's not squishing down anymore. Looks pretty good for the most part. So, also by the way, if you notice that the hands and stuff like that look super grangly and weird and stuff, um, these animations aren't exactly what it will look like in game. It's just kind of a close estimation because of how the game handles its animation system, where it's like partially physics based. So some of the animations might look a little weird in Blender, but when you go in game, it'll be fine for the most part. But if you see anything that stands out a lot, like if this leg is totally out of place and stuff like that, and you made sure to rig it the right way, then I would just double check your weight painting to make sure stuff looks good. Um, but yeah, for the most part, it kind of looks like the weight painting was fairly accurate, if I had to say so myself. I don't really think we have to make really hardly any huge adjustments here, but we can probably find a couple other things. Let's go to like this pose. Take a look here. I want to look specifically at the chest region because I have a feeling that some spots should be rigged up a little bit better than they are. We have this spine piece here, and it's back to there. Just try giving this a little bit strength. Okay, maybe not that much. Maybe just like a light brush of it. Yeah, like there's kind of like this sort of spot that sort of sticks out. Kind of paint over that a little. Just looking around the model. By the way, if you see me orbiting around like this, again, I don't remember what the exact uh, hotkey it is in Blender. I think it's just holding down middle mouse. In my case, I'm holding down Alt and then I'm using left click to like drag around and orbit around and stuff like that. Um, if you want to tweak options like that, you can go to Edit Preferences and go to Navigation, and you can change like the orbit method, the sensitivity, things like that. So you can just play around with these settings, and you can kind of find stuff out for yourself that way. Um, one thing I will show, you actually might notice that like you can kind of see that it's like a little bit like sharp in some spots. We can actually use blurring to kind of help mitigate that somewhat and sort of like even out this weight painting so that it's a little bit more smooth. Because this model comes from an older game, the geometry is going to be a little bit more um, low poly, right? So there's going to be less polys for it to work with, so it's just going to like naturally it's going to look a little bit weird in some spots. Like here, for example, is a pretty good location of like we can fix this a little bit more with some better weight painting. Let's see. It's kind of, let's actually kind of get rid of some of this because it's going over a little bit too much for my liking. Play with the strength down a little bit. You don't know, oh, this is actually moving more that direction. We actually want this to be that way. And we'll kind of blur that, turn the weight back down to 0. Just kind of paint over this. I don't want it to be rigged to that arm. I don't think it should be rigged to the arm that well. Or, okay. That's probably fine. Not like a super duper big deal. It's not going to be something that a lot of people are going to generally notice. Um, let's actually go ahead. Yeah, see, this is actually a pretty good example of like the weight painting. Like you can see how the mesh kind of breaks right here, right? So this is an example of like a spot that we can kind of tweak a little bit more. Let's go to this bone. I'll go ahead and just try to blur this at first. Let's see, how does that handle Chris? No. Okay. Try to give this side a bit more. It's not too much. We have to, again, we want to be light when we do this. We don't want to like go super overboard with how we're painting this. You can see this arm is actually, this is the side is actually being rigged into the arm a little bit too much. So we'll kind of tone this back a bit. But it's not so egregiously taking over. This is probably going to be a similar situation, so we'll kind of do that too. Again, we're just kind of getting rid of some of the weighting here. Blur this a little bit into there. That. It's kind of another example of like sort of another spot that we can kind of fix up a bit. Just bring it down like that. I think that looks pretty decent. Those. Let's see. Is there anything we can do about this neck? Without it looking too crazy. Not exactly. I might just have to work with the way it looks like right now and just be happy with how it is. But yeah, okay. Um, Also you can kind of see like the elbow pads and knee pads don't line up super duper well. Again, that's just because of like the placement of the joints and stuff like that being a little bit off. But again, I'm trying to do this more for tutorial. I'm spending a lot longer on it than I probably should be. But again, I just want to be thorough and show you guys this kind of stuff in detail, like mostly unedited, just because I feel like um, a lot of people miss out on seeing it all kind of done in real time and seeing what you can kind of tweak and edit, right? So like this leg, for example, we can probably just blur this leg, like the weight painting of it a bit, because it is super duper, like when it goes backwards like this, it doesn't look super duper natural. So we can kind of like help blend it in a little bit more by just blurring um, this edge out a little bit. We'll change this to projected. Okay. Well, that helped blur it a little bit, but let's go ahead. Just try to like add a bit more. Yeah, so that's a tad bit better. Let's see. Try to take the strength down just a little bit. Okay, let's actually go the other way. This one we actually want to make smaller. Not too small though. For it. Might have to just live with it kind of looking like that, in all honesty. Like it's gonna look a little bit weird, right? It's not gonna look quite so perfect, but it's gonna be decent enough, I think, for the most part. Yeah, that looks a little bit better at least. Go ahead and actually take down the weight painting just a little bit. Oh, that's a little bit too much. Hmm. Okay, well, it's weirdly not painting over right there. Just kind of like blur it a little bit. You might just have to kind of live with that big chunky spot. Honestly, this is probably something that you're never going to really notice unless you're slowing the game footage down um, by quite a lot. And I'm not going to tweak the hands. I could tweak the hands, but that would take a long time to do. And we're already like nearing 2 hours, and we haven't even gotten to the Unreal Engine part. But fortunately, that part shouldn't be too lengthy. We'll see. Um, but yeah, we are pretty much good to go. Now we can actually export this guy into Unreal Engine and get him all set up for the mod. So let's start with getting rid of the animation data, and you'll notice he's still in the same pose. To fix that, you can go into pose mode and then hit A or Control A, whatever it is for you, or select all. Go to pose, clear transform, clear all transforms, and then he's back in his normal pose like that. And from here, we need to also make sure that, actually just forgot to do this. We need to make sure that he is parented to the skeleton, like our mesh here is parented to the skeleton. So what we're gonna do is we can literally just drag and drop from inside of the outliner and hold down shift, parent, and he's good to go. If you see any weird offsets happen, make sure that his scale and location and all that sort of stuff is zeroed out. So I would say I would actually maybe even do this before parenting just to be safe. Go to Object, Apply, All Transforms, and you'll see that it zeroes out its location, rotation, and its scale. It's set to 1. Um, also double check that you do the same thing for here. I want to do it just in case, even if it's actually set already. Um, so we'll do All Transforms on that. Okay, now we'll parent this. And we can also we can get rid of the t-shirt or we can leave it in. I'm going to leave it in just in case. We're going to change some of our export settings so that we don't actually have the shirt show up. Um, so yeah, I mean, you could leave it in. I guess we could also do this. Let's do this. Let's make a backup of this guy. So we'll select all these, Control D to duplicate, uh, call this backup. And again, I showed you how to duplicate earlier. It's like up here, object, duplicate objects, if you don't know the key behind. And we'll keep this back up too. And we'll just get rid of the t-shirt now, because why not? Okay, so save one more time. Super important thing that you got to make sure you change, otherwise the mod is going to break and not work. T-shirt has to be called armature. It has to be called this specifically. Um, if you don't call it this, then the armature is going to break and it's not going to work. So make sure you call this armature, the skeleton, inside the project. From here, we're going to double save it again. We'll select everything. So we'll go to the armature and we'll just hold down shift and select all this. And we'll go to export, export FBX, and it takes us into here. So we need to call this FBX the name of the model that we're going to replace, which we're replacing the t-shirt model. So we just call this t-shirt. Um, and you can call it something else, and then you can rename it later on, of course, if you want to do that. But in my case, I'll just call it T-shirt. Operator presets. I'm going to swap it over to. Oh, actually, I don't have the operator preset set up here, so I'll have to do it here. That's okay. I should be able to do this for the most part. I have some other operator presets set up. Um, but just to double check, we're going to do one thing here. I'm actually going to go. Shoot, hold on. We'll go into my older version of Blender and I'll bring it over to my other monitor. And I just want to make sure that I got the shortcuts right. or not the shortcuts, but the export settings, right? Because I don't want to like tell anybody the wrong thing and then it not work. So we'll drag that. Oh, drag this back out. Okay. So you're not going to see this, but all I'm doing is just checking the export settings to make sure they are correct. Okay. So I have another monitor pulled up here. Okay, so here's what you need to change. We're gonna change this object types that we just have armature and mesh selected. So we'll just hold shift down like this. We'll change this to selected objects, limit to. Each time you export your FBX, you just want to make sure to select whatever you're going to export each time. That's all that this really does, or make sure that this does. We're going to set the scale to 0.01. We're going to set we don't have to change any of this stuff here. We need to make sure apply unit, use space transform, that's good. Geometry, we want to go ahead and give it face smoothing. And we can also do apply modifiers. This actually isn't super important, but I would just turn it on anyway. Um, so apply modifiers, don't need to worry about triangulate phases because it's going to do that for us anyway. And then also super important thing in the armature tab, you got to make sure to uncheck add leaf bones. We don't want that. And also you can uncheck bake animation because we're not really baking. We're not going to export really any animations per se. So you can just uncheck that. Um, so that should be good to go. So now what you can do from here, if you don't want to change those settings every time, you can go to this plus symbol. We'll call this RNA export. And now if I were to set this back to default, and if I just click this, now all my export settings are here. Every time you boot up Blender, your export settings for your FBX stuff will get set back to default. So you just got to make sure to change it to this, and then you're good. So we'll export this, and we should be done with Blender. We might have to come back here in case we need to troubleshoot something, but for now, we'll just keep this minimized, and I'll close my other version of Blender I had open. Okay, let's go to the Unreal editor now, finally, right? It's been almost 2 hours. Or maybe not 2 hours when I edit parts of the video down. Oop, that's my library. My game library. Let's go to the library here. Okay, so you'll launch Unreal from here, or you might actually, what it might do when you install Unreal Engine 5.2.1 is it might actually make a desktop shortcut, which I use a desktop shortcut for this. So we will just boot that up, and it's going to take a second. Usually first time boot up might take this long sometimes. Um, or if you haven't booted it up in a while, sometimes it also takes a bit longer. Shouldn't take too long though. You're not gonna have to wait here for like an hour or anything like that. But let's see. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, so I have a bunch of projects in here already. Let's just say you're making a project brand new for the first time. So we'll go to game. You want to set it to blank, blueprint, desktop platform, quality preset. Uncheck starter content, uncheck ray tracing, and right here you'll pick a project location. I made a folder in my modding folder for my UE5 projects. I just called it UE5 projects. I select the folder, that's where they're going to go. And then the project name, you can call it whatever you want. We're going to go back and actually do something internally in our project files in Windows. So I like to just call it whatever I'm making. So we'll call this character uh, tutorial something. Or can't spell tutorial, can I? Tutorial, yes. Okay. So make a blank project. And we're going to have to change some settings in our blank project in order to get stuff to work. So before you touch anything else in here, let's start with what we need to change in the editor up here. I'm going to get rid of that window because I don't think that window's there by default. Okay, so up in File, or actually in Edit, you go to Editor Preferences, and in the search bar, we're just going to search for chunk, and then you want to check chunk allow chunk ID assignments. Make sure this is checked. Okay. We'll go to project settings and we'll go to the packaging tab on the left-hand side. We'll see there's a bunch of different stuff here. We want to make sure use pack file, use IO store, generate chunks. We want to make sure that's turned on. Share material shader code is turned off. And then there is also one other thing. What is it? I'm trying to actually remember off the top of my head. Might be misremembering it. Hold on one second. Oh, I remember what it was. Um, go to editor. Yeah, okay, right here. This exclude editor content when cooking. You can check mark that. We don't want the editor content to show up because that's going to make your mod very large, and we don't want that. And then also under packaging, let's exit out of that. Under packaging, I'm also going to go to the advanced section here. Don't worry too much about all this stuff for now. What we're going to change is directories should never cook. I'm going to assign this engine directory to never cook because again, there's stuff in here that we don't really need to have in our project files when we pack everything. And that should be it, unless I'm forgetting something, but I don't believe I am. Okay. So, what we need to do in here is we need to recreate the file structure that Rooftops and Alleys uses for the different assets that we're replacing, right? So we're replacing character assets. So here's a good opportunity to go back to FModel. So if we go back to FModel, we can open it up. Take a second here. And in here, let's just take a look. Oop, I clicked out of it. Clicking out of it. Oops. Did it again. Sorry about that. What we're going to do, we just want to find these folders. So let's start at the top. So we have rooftops and alleys, and we have content, and then we have a bunch of folders in here. So you might notice that our project is similar. Like we have a content folder here and an engine folder. So this content folder is a match to what this content folder is. So what we need to do is we need to make folders in here that match where the file path the of the models that we're replacing are going to go. So we need to replace the upper body, the t-shirt. And to see that, by the way, if you want to open it up and see exactly where it is, it's the t-shirt U asset. I believe if you even like double click on it, it'll bring up a 3D viewer here, which we don't really need. But you'll notice that there might be a list to the file path here. Oh, maybe not. Never mind. Getting ahead of myself. Let's just start with making these folders. So we need to make a character folder. Character. We need to make a 2024 dash character. Dash character. Okay, we need to make a folder labeled body parts. And we need to do a folder called upper body. So in this folder is where we're gonna bring in our FBX file. Let's also do the folders for the other pieces because we want, since we're replacing just one model, there's still going to be the problem of the other pieces of the body, the head, the lower body, and the shoes. So let's go ahead and make folders for those too. We have the shoes, we have the lower body, and we have the head. Okay. So now that we have that done, let's open up the upper body. I'm going to go ahead and just drag and drop the FBX from our project. I still didn't spell tutorial right. That's really... Oh, wait, no, I did. I thought I didn't for a second. Anyway, drag the FBX over into here. And we're going to get a bunch of different options here. And it's going to look a little overwhelming. Don't worry. We'll cover it all. Skeletal mesh, import mesh, that looks good. We don't have a skeleton made, so it'll make a skeleton for us. Looks like we have, yeah, that looks okay. Creating a physics asset's what we want. as well. So that's fine. Import animations, don't have animations, so we don't need to import those. And then we have this part, local, search location local, and then create new materials. We do want to create new materials in this case. So I want to go ahead and leave that on. And then we have this advanced thing. This is actually something we could have used for inverting normal maps. We already inverted it ourselves, but I guess if you have a normal map that is going to need to be inverted, you could actually do it through here, which is kind of interesting. But let's just do import all. Nothing really need to change here. And it'll take our mesh in, and you might get like a message log with some errors and stuff like that. But now we have our character. He's looking a little weird. We might actually have to fix him up a little bit because he got imported in a bit funky. So we'll be able to fix all that because we have, well, actually, let's see. It looks like it might have missed our textures. It um, looks like what happened was it didn't actually carry over the materials that it should have into the project. Let's go back to shading. Ah, I see why. Because we have this overlay being added on. Let's do this then. Let's go ahead and just delete all the stuff that we just had. We'll re-import this again. No harm done. Let's actually go back to our project. I want to go ahead and just take off this, whatever this is. We'll just have this be one color. It should be fine. Yep. And I think this specular map might mess things up. We don't really need it. So we'll turn that off. We have a roughness map, that's fine. And okay. Also, I have this for some reason. We don't need that either. That actually might have also been a problem. We're going to have to re-export our FBX, by the way, from doing this. Just to note that. We'll take off the specular. And, or actually, I guess we can leave it in, but we won't keep it connected. We'll just have it unconnected like that. So we can leave it in the project in the Blender file. We'll leave it disconnected. We'll disconnect that. Get rid of this, and put that back in. And so now we have just that base color, roughness. Looks like this isn't connected, which it should be to there. Um, that, that, that. Okay, that's fine. So file, save. We'll go back to our layout tab. Remember to select everything. File, export, FBX, call it t-shirt. Make sure it's the right export settings and export back out. Okay, let's jump back over into Unreal and drag and drop this back in. Let's see if it gives us any issues this time. I don't believe it should. It looks a little bit better. It looks like it actually did what we wanted it to do. For the most part, anyway. But you see, he is kind of shiny in some places. We can actually change that in the materials. I wanted to at least make sure it got the colors and all that kind of stuff for us, which it looks like it did. So that's good. We got that far. So that's okay. It does look like it copied over some of the textures though, which since these textures are all being used, like these are all the same texture, right? So let's actually get rid of some of these. Let's try to optimize our mod here a little bit because we're using a bunch of different copies of the same texture that we don't really need to have it like be like that, right? So what we can do is look for this color. So we right here, I'm opening up. I'm actually opening up the material, right? So I'm double clicking on it, opening up the material, and I'm looking on the left hand side, and I can see this doesn't have a texture, so we need to give it one. We'll give it the. We can actually drag and drop the texture it needs to be, which is this pursuit cop texture here. We'll do the same thing for this one. This is linked. Oh, I see. It's actually linking to metallic, which is incorrect. So we'll fix that later, but we'll set that up first. Let's see, rough. That should be the roughness. This should be the normal. Okay, so that looks right. So we'll apply that, save it. Okay, then we'll open up this one, do the same thing. We'll drag these down so we can actually kind of see a little bit. Um, that should be the color, this should be the roughness, and this should be the normal map. Now it looks like that. And we'll do one last thing here. I'm going to just close the windows and reopen them though. We need to change. So you might notice that this texture is linking into the wrong location. This is linking into metallic when it should be in roughness. So to fix that, we'll just right click, break this link, then go to roughness and put it in there. And now it should be correct. It might not quite look correct yet. We can do some tweaks to that here in a minute. But for now, let's just at least make sure that the textures we have are in the right places that they should be. You might notice there's a slot for specular here, and we had a specular map texture, so we could bring it in and fix this. But for now, let's just go ahead and fix up what it brought in automatically for us. So put that in roughness, apply, the top left, save. And so now he's looking a little bit better, right? He doesn't look super duper. His helmet's super shiny, but for the most part, the rest of his body looks pretty alright. Um, okay, let's go ahead and actually bring in the specular map then, because we can do that as well pretty easily. We can actually go to the textures and find the specular map and just drag and drop this in, and it will just import straight into Unreal, right? You can just drag it from your window like this. And we'll open up our little window for here. And we can just, again, like we did before, drag and drop the texture in like that. And we'll link this to specular. Let's see. I'm not quite sure if this is, I'm not quite sure exactly how this is going to look until we preview the whole model, but we'll just go ahead and we'll add it into each of the materials and we'll see how it looks. If it doesn't look kind of correct, we could always just forego it. Um, Hopefully whatever model you're using isn't going to be too complicated in terms of the textures that are being put on the materials here. Um, Also, sorry if I'm not kind of explaining what textures and materials really are. Basically, all you have to know is that a material is made up of a bunch of different textures. One that defines the color, one that defines how smooth or shiny it is, one that defines micro details that show up in the lighting, and one that also defines kind of something similar to the smooth and shininess that I was talking about before. There's a difference between all these different things, but they're useful for different reasons, and they are what make materials and characters look the way that they do in game. Okay, so this looks pretty good. Some of this stuff, by the way, might not show up in game, but for the most part, this is how they're going to look. At least the colors are going to come through. Okay, so now that we have this done, we are going to, let's actually organize our project at least a little bit here. I want to go ahead in this folder. I want to put in, we'll call this Pursuit Cop Textures. And we'll take all these textures and just drag them in here. Also, I want to double check something really quick. Okay, that's a normal map. That's a normal map. This actually needs to be a, well, I guess it can be a color map and it's not going to hurt anything. Okay, so we'll leave the materials in here. We could also organize this into its own spot, but we'll just leave the materials in here like this. Okay, let's go back to FModel though. So we need to name the skeleton and rename the physics asset and put those in certain locations as well. And the reason for that is because we do want to replace the actual skeletal mesh, right? We want to replace the character. This is like the mesh part. But it also generated a physics asset and a skeleton. Basically, the physics asset is just the collisions of the model. It's what defines where the model is going to run into things and collide around and stuff like that. And the skeleton is what helps move the animations and all that stuff around, right? The problem, though, is that because the game already has a skeleton and already has a physics asset set up, um, we don't want to replace the default skeleton and the default physics asset. We just want these to exist in the project so that our t-shirt skeletal mesh that we just made can reference the correct location that's in the game. So what we can do in here, right, is we can actually go to the upper body, go to the t-shirt asset again, and we can look for where the skeleton is supposed to be. You can actually see it's skeletal mesh, and then we have object name skeleton. This is what we're looking for. This RNA UE4 underscore mannequin underscore skeleton. And we can see the object path that this is in. So it's under game main folder, content, mannequin, character mesh, RNA, UE4, all that stuff. So if we go back up here, right, game and content are kind of the same folder. It's called differently here. You just start with main folder and go work your way down, right? So if I were to go up here, we have a main folder, we have content, we have mannequin, and then we have the character, and then we have the mesh, and then we have this skeleton in here, right? So what we need to do is we need to copy the name. I'll just copy the name in FModel, rename it to this. I'm going to get rid of that 0.0 at the end because we don't need that. And we'll just recreate the folder structure. So we need to go back up to content and make a new folder called main folder. And we need to make another one called content. And another one called mannequin. Mannequin. Also, very important that you make sure that you spell these all correctly. If you misspell these, it's going to cause problems. So if in case you have issues or stuff doesn't work right, this is one of the things I would make sure to troubleshoot. Like if your model just doesn't show up in game at all, um, this could probably be why. Okay, so we have this folder path made here. So let's go back to the skeleton that we have in here. We'll just drag and drop him over into the mesh folder like that. Okay, so we have the skeleton, the one we're not replacing. We're just referencing it. We have it in the correct location. So now we need to do the same thing for the physics asset, and it's also in a certain path here. It's under main folder, content. So we have main folder, content, then we need to make a folder called physics. And make, and then we put the name of it. It's RNA-physics body. So let's go back. Actually, just copy the name here because we can do that in FModel. Because we can just like highlight it, hit Control C, right? And then you just copy the text over. And then we need to put that in the physics folder, which is this folder right here. So we'll drag and drop it into there. And now we have this in the correct location. So we're actually pretty close to being done. There's a couple other things that we need to do though. First thing we need to do is we need to make a label for the mod that assigns a pack chunk ID so that other mods can be used alongside stuff that you're already using. So we use chunk IDs to determine load order as well as just like having the mods all be split up into their own pack chunks just makes things easier for um, modding purposes, as far as just like making sure stuff doesn't necessarily like more mods can be added on top of each other. Nothing's gonna like conflict or anything like that. So we'll go back up all the way to the content folder. This is how I do it. I've seen some tutorials of people showcasing how to make like backpack mods and stuff where they'll put the label in a certain spot. I'm going to show you just where you can put the label at the top of your folder list in your content folder. And there's a couple other things we need to do after that, but you can just put it here, and it should take everything that's in here under this content folder and put it in your mod. Except for a few things. We'll get to that. So we need to right click, go to miscellaneous, and then go to data asset, and we type in label. We'll have primary asset label. And then we call this label underscore whatever the name of the mod is. So we'll call this character char tutorial. Double click. We'll change the priority to 1. And then the chunk ID can be any number you want between like 1,000 and like 10,000. So we'll just type in a bunch of random numbers. So we'll do, let's do that 97846 or something. I don't know. There's a list, currently ongoing list of different mods that have their chunk ID set. There might be issues if you have a chunk ID that's the same as another mod and you have them both installed, so just bear that in mind. But just give it any sort of random set of 4 numbers or 5 numbers and you'll be good. Cook rule should be set to always cook, and we want to label assets in my directory. What this is going to basically do is everything in this directory and in the subdirectories is going to get labeled with this chunk ID, which is important because we want all the stuff in our mod to be, labeled. Um, so it's also going to apply to everything in these folders. Now, like I said before about the skeleton and the physics asset, we need to make sure that those things are not actually packed into our mod because we don't want to replace the default ones. So let's go back to where we had them. Let's go back to, say, the physics one, the physics body. We're going to right click this, go to asset actions, and then assign chunk, and we'll just keep the chunk ID at 0. And what this is basically going to do is it's going to prevent this particular asset from being packed into the project. That's all that this really does. And we can actually look at the audit assets option here. It's going to take a second to build and management, right? We can see that this chunk is now set to 0. That's what we want. Because if we go to, say, this, right, and we look at this in the audit assets panel without actually setting the chunk ID as 0, you see how this chunk is set to the chunk that we gave it for the whole mod? That means it's going to get packed and cooked, and we don't want that. So again, asset actions, assign to chunk, set it to 0. Click apply, or do save all, so it saves that. And now we're pretty much done, I think. Now we might move on to the troubleshooting. Oh, actually, one more thing. Almost forgot. Let's go File, Save All, and we'll close out of the Unreal Editor here. We'll minimize that stuff, and we'll go back to our Unreal Engine 5 projects here. We're going to go to the folder where we made the project, and all we're going to do is we need to make sure to rename the UE project, the U project right here, to specifically Rooftops and Alleys. The way that it's spelled doesn't really matter. You can spell it all in lowercase if you want. But we need to make sure it's called this because otherwise it's going to mess up the folder structure in the mod when it gets packed or packaged, and we don't want that. So we just need to change it to that. Boot up Unreal Engine 5.2.1 again. Go back to the project. And it's going to ask us to select the right one. You'll notice I have a lot of duplicates here, right? The way you can tell is if you look at the project location, you can see I have a bunch of different ones here, but this is our tutorial one because it's char tutorial rooftops and alleys.u project. So we'll open this. Okay. And now we're going to do one last check. I think this should still be set to 0, but let's just go ahead and do it again. Not going to hurt. Asset edit actions, assign the chunk, 0, file, save. Okay. Now we're going to package this thing. So we're going to go to platforms at the top, Windows, set the binary configuration to shipping, then package project. From here, we're going to pick where we want it to get packed to. So I want to send it to here. We'll call this character. We'll call this just, tutorial. And we'll pack it in here. Okay, and we're done. That took a little while. The first time you pack something, it's going to take a bit. But let's see if we did what we are supposed to do. Let's see if it all came out right. So we'll go to the modding folder again. We'll go to packing, tutorial, and you'll have this folder now. You'll have Windows, Rooftops and Alleys, Content, Paks, and you should have this pack chunk folder. These 3 files here are what we care about. So we'll go ahead and we'll copy these and we'll go to our Paks shortcut, paste it in here. And one last thing you got to do. you need to rename these. You need to rename these so that they have an underscore P at the end, or you can call it whatever you want. But you need to make sure there's an underscore capital P at the end. If you don't do that, Unreal Engine will not be able to recognize that they are patch pack files, which is important because if we're replacing an asset, it needs to be a patch pack file to do so. So again, for modding purposes, make sure you put an underscore P at the end. We'll call this, again, we can call this like Pursuit Cop now, I guess. Underscore P. And by the way, if you want to rename a bunch of files all at one time that are named the same, you can just shift like left click, shift left click through them all, right click, rename, and then call it, like whatever series of things you want. But you have to make sure they're all like the name of all of them are the same exact name. Okay, and that should be it. So now if we go to Rooftops and Alleys, we boot her up here. I actually have the intro video disabled, so that's why you probably won't see it right here. Okay, so we have this, play, construction site. Let's actually turn the music down. That's pretty loud. Okay, so we have some issues, actually, surprisingly. We have, looks like, well, they're kind of issues. Let's actually go ahead and go to customize. We need to actually set our head. Oh, actually, I forgot. There's one other set of things we have to do. We need to replace those files that I was talking about before. So we actually we almost have it, but we need to do a few more things. So, but at least this is just a test to make sure the t-shirt model works, which it looks like it's working. So that is good. I'm a little concerned about the way that the shading looks on the front there. There is something we can do to actually fix that, though. I'll showcase that here in a minute. But let's go ahead and exit out here. Oh, turned up my volume a little. Okay, so let's go back to... Oh, yeah, okay, let's do this. Let's go back to Blender here. And we'll go ahead and we'll just duplicate this setup. And we'll call it... we'll call it the skeleton in this setup doesn't have to be anything, by the way. The way that I'm about to show you how to do all this is like um not exactly what you have to do, but this is how I do it for my mods. So what we're gonna do, oh wait, hold on. Not get rid of that. Okay, there we go. So what we're going to do is we're going to just replace, actually, we don't even need to duplicate this. We can actually bring back the PSK in here. Let's do that. Let's bring in the PSKs. FModel, exports, game, character, go to the head. We'll start with the head first. We'll replace the default head. So all we're really going to do to fix this is we can actually replace the default head here and just not have any materials assigned to it at all. But another thing we could do as well is we can actually change the mesh out and make it just like a tiny little square, and that will also work. So what we could do is something like this. Let's go ahead and hide. Actually, well, we can. Yeah, no, we'll go ahead and hide this. We'll hide that. And we want to make a plane basically at where we want to make a plane or add a plane object into Blender here. We'll make a plane right there, just a flat surface. And we'll go ahead and we'll just join it to here like that. A little hard to see. There we go. It's a little bit better. And let's see, did this carry over the materials? Oh yeah, let's do this too. So we added a plane, we joined it to the head mesh here. Let's go ahead and just add on just one of the materials. Doesn't have to be any particular one. We'll just assign. What we'll do is we'll click on the model, right? So we have it selected. we'll go into edit mode, and then we'll click this face, and then in the material tab down here, we'll just assign like this first material, just like that. Just like that. And then what we'll do is we'll select everything else. So what we can do is just hit Control I to invert everything, and then we can just delete all these faces like that. So now we have this head default mesh replace, and we can just scale this down to be really, really, really tiny. Because the idea is that we're basically just never going to be able to see this. It's going to be super duper small. In fact, it might be so small to the point where it actually could cause us issues um, in uh, in Unreal, but I don't think it should. And we'll just remove unused slots. Oop, wait, we need to be in object mode first to do that. So we'll move unused slots, and now we have essentially um, like a head replacement model. So we don't have to call this anything. We can call this like empty model. I don't know. It's not really empty, right? But it's going to be empty when we bring it in game. So we'll call this armature. Make sure it's called armature. It might actually not let you rename it. In case it doesn't let you rename it, we just need to call this armature something else. And now we can rename that to armature. Then we'll select all this stuff again, file, export, FBX, and I already did this for my projects. I actually have like empty models that I've made right here. But for our case, we'll just put empty models here. So we'll call this what we need to call it in game, which if we're replacing the default head, let's go to character head. We need to call it head dash default. So that's what we're calling. Well, that's what we're gonna call it. Head default operator RNA export, and we'll just put it in there. Okay, so that's the head. Now we're gonna do the shoes and the lower legs, and that should be good. Since they share the same skeleton, we only really need to do one export, and I'll show you what I mean by that here in a minute. So we'll just go ahead and we'll just get rid of that. Let's bring in the legs, I guess. Let's just do the legs. Lower body, do long loose pants. We'll replace these. So looks like, yeah, it's super big here. So again, what we need to do, we need to just basically make an empty model here again. So what I'm going to do is actually make the plane and put it right up here at this bone where the legs are be, or I could put it actually at the spine joint bone there. But we'll put it right here. We'll put it at the spine, the spine bone. And to do that, we'll select the little dot end right there, and we'll go to we'll go to armature. We'll do snap, and then snap cursor to selected. This brings this little 3D cursor of ours up to here, and then we'll go to add. Actually, we need to go back to object mode. Go to add mesh plane. We'll shrink this down a little bit again just to make it tiny. Or we'll keep it big for now so we can select it easier because there's one thing we have to do. We'll combine this plane with this model right there. And okay, the origin point's still the same. That's good. By the way, important to make sure that you select the plane and then the pants first and then join them. Okay, so we will assign a material to this. So we're going to go into edit mode, click on this face, click the first material here, assign, and then we'll just do the same thing we did before where we invert, delete all the faces, we delete, and we'll do same where we just shrink this down so it's really tiny. And we'll go ahead and just remove all the unused slots because we don't need them. We just need the one slot. And there we go. So now if we can call this like empty model again. Doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. You can call it whatever you want, or you don't have to name it at all. I'm just doing it just to keep memory of it myself. Okay, so we need to call this armature. And in this case, we'll just export out one FBX. We'll call this like empty legs or something. And let's go back to our mod folder here. Go to projects, tutorial, and we'll actually just make a copy. And we're going to do that because we need to do the shoes and the legs. So the legs, let's just replace, we can replace any of them, by the way, but we'll do these, we'll do long loose pants. So let's name that the way that it should be. Long loose pants. And then we'll do the shoes, which there's only one pair. Do sport sneakers dash white. Okay, so now that we have those done, let's go back to Unreal Editor. The Unreal Editor here, we have it open still. And we'll just do the same thing with importing stuff, right? We're just going to drag and drop our head default file into here. The head has its own unique skeleton, so we need to also remake and name the skeleton bone and all that stuff. So let's bring this in, and I don't think we need to. You know what? We actually, now that I'm thinking about it, we don't need to worry too much about. I don't think we need to worry too much about the head being imported like perfectly, because if it's getting replaced by an empty mesh, then it's not going to matter if it's getting replaced properly or not. Um, well, let's just take a look though. Let's take a look. Let's go to the head model actually in FModel here and see if this has head default skeleton. Does it have a physics asset? This has a normal default physics asset. So we can actually right click, create physics asset. I could take it from another project, but I don't think I should do that. Oh, there we go. Okay. So the only reason I needed to make that is set that to 0.1 like that, I guess. The only reason I need to make that, again, is just to have a reference to the existing one that the game has. So the physics asset for the game is just called head under dash default underscore physics asset, which is the default name that it normally gets given. And it is right by the head, default head here. And then same thing for the skeleton, I believe. It's just called head dash default underscore skeleton. Yep, it's in the right spot. Okay, so we'll just stick with that. And we can just get rid of the material. Doesn't matter that much to have that. We just need these three things. Okay, let's do the lower body. We have long loose pants. So this one we need to assign skeleton, the physics asset. It's weird that it's not being textured now, but I think it's still fine. That looks okay. Actually, in our case, we'll just say do not create materials and don't import any textures. Okay, so what this did, so you'll notice it only made one thing. That's because these pants are assigned to the skeleton, right? So if I go to the pants, for example, the lower body, long loose pants, you can see that that the skeleton's the same as the upper body, and the physics asset is also being shared with it too. So we just need the pants to be here. And then the shoes, sport sneakers white. And we'll do the same thing, that skeleton, that physics asset, don't create any materials, import, and there we go. Believe that the shoes are also using the same mannequin, same physics body, all the good stuff. Okay, so let's go back to the head though. You remember how we didn't have the physics asset and the skeleton from the upper body being replaced? Same deal here. So we need to actually go to asset actions, assign the chunk, make sure that's 0. Do the same thing for this one as well. And that should all be good now. So now we have the other parts of the body replaced, and the upper body's the character, right? Like the full character. So now when you go in game, you can select the default head and it'll just disappear. Okay. Something else I wanted to cover as well, because I didn't expect this to happen, but in case it does, I want to showcase this because I think it's important that this is something that people can figure out how to fix. Um, let's actually go back in game real quick because I want to show what I saw that I thought was important uh, to note when I was first testing this in game. I had an issue where the shading is a little bit off. It doesn't look quite right. And you'll see what I mean here in a second. So if I am running around out in the sun, you can see that there's like these weird kind of like sort of pixely, like the textures look a little weird, right? They look a little pixely on the back. Um, that's due to having like it's basically just kind of like a material issue. Um, so there is a way to solve that, but it's a bit tricky for me to explain. So I'm just gonna try to do my best to like show how to do it here. Um, so and also by the way, just to showcase this as well, if I go to the model in Blender, for example, you'll notice that the textures on the back here don't look weird at all, right? They don't look all speckly and off, you know? So we need to fix that, basically. Um, let's go back out of the game, go to Unreal. Something I actually was originally thinking might be the problem is the materials themselves that maybe, I guess we could also, well, you know what we could do? We could just try experimenting and getting rid of the specular map here because this isn't normally something you have to have. Um, or the roughness too. The problem is that it looks like super ultra shiny now, so I'm not sure about that. Let's go ahead and just do something like, well, nah, okay, let's do a test first. Let's troubleshoot a little bit more. Let's take the roughness out. Let's take the specular out as well, because that might be causing issues for the materials. So we'll just get rid of these samples in here. Apply. We'll just save all these, and we'll repackage the mod. And it's gonna look wrong in it's gonna look wrong in the editor here. Like it's gonna look weirdly shiny and stuff like that. But if my hunch is right, it should look okay in game. Because because this model comes from an older game, it's using textures that are a little bit um, maybe not so much required for the mod to work and look correct. So we'll just ignore that stuff then. Um, hold on one second. I'm just double checking. Yeah, okay, we assigned that correctly. Okay, let's go ahead and package this again. And by the way, if you want to repack something, you can just leave it in the same folder and it will overwrite stuff for you. Okay, and we're done again. So let's go to our, wrong folder. Go to our packing, tutorial, Windows, content, Paks. Go in here again, copy that to our Paks folder. Get rid of this one. And we'll rename this again. Call it Shoot Cop. And we will boot the game up again and see if we fixed our problems. Hopefully. Might have to do one last try at this, but after that I think it should turn out okay. For sure this time. Either that or it'll look just fine in game. We'll see. Okay, yeah, it's looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and go to customize and get rid of, so make sure you have the shirt enabled. We have that on. Default head is on. Make sure these pants, which pants are they? These ones. And the shoes are also getting replaced. So there we go. There is our pursuit cop. He's running around. Look at him go. Playing with the mouse and keyboard right now. I don't actually know like the keyboard inputs. But yeah, that's a custom character. So yeah, I guess if you have issues with the shading and stuff like that, if you have a bunch of extra textures, there are potential problems with using those where it could get a little glitchy, like the materials can get a little funky. So I would probably just refrain from using any other textures beyond the color and the normal if you can. Um, but for the most part, that is pretty much it. So if you followed all these steps, I know it's been a really long time, pushing on almost 3 hours at this point. Or well, I'm not really sure if it's gonna be like that when I cut the video down. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you guys learned something. Hopefully this also helps if you want to explore doing other modding, like let's say you just want to replace like just the head model, or maybe you just want to add new pants, or you want to add like a new shirt. It's the same concept, right? You just got to replace the right asset and structure it in how the game is set up, and that's pretty much all you got to do. But I wanted to at least show the process and how to make the mod in the Unreal project, because I think that's where a lot of people, including myself, initially get tripped up when it comes to making this. So thanks for watching, and yeah, that's pretty much it. See ya.